In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a properly formatted scientific table. To start us off, make sure that you've navigated to the Table Practice worksheet in the Excel Tutorial Practice Data Excel file. We're going to start this tutorial by making sure that everything is the correct font and the correct font size. So I'm going to click and drag to highlight all of my data and all of my words. Then I'm going to make sure that I'm on the Home tab. I'm going to use the drop-down menu to select the Calibri font and use the drop-down menu to select the 11-point font size. So now everything in the table is the correct size and the correct font. The next thing that I'm going to do is format my table title. So what I want to do here is click on the table title cell and drag across so that I have selected each of the cells that is above the data in my table and also the row labels. So you've noticed that I've selected cell A1, B1, C1, and D1. The reason that I selected those is because I have a row label in column A and I have data in columns B, C, and D. So that's how much width I want to have for my table title. Once I've selected those 4 cells, I'm going to go up to the top over here and I'm going to click on Merge Across. So I just clicked on this little drop down menu next to the Merge button and now I select Merge Across. That's going to turn those 4 cells into 1 cell. The next thing that I want to do is tell Excel that I want it to wrap text. So wrap text just means that instead of having all of my letters on one big long line that goes on forever and ever and ever, I want Excel to stop when it runs out of room in this cell and put the remainder of the words or letters on the next line. So to do that, I click on the wrap text button up here 1 time, and that will tell Excel to wrap my text. You might have noticed that some of your words disappeared from the end of your cell, so you need to change the height of this top row so that all of your words will appear. To do that, you want to hover your mouse between the number 1 and the number 2 until your cursor changes shape. So you can see my cursor right here is a little bit funny looking. Once I see that shape, I'll click and drag down a little bit. And when I do that, it just makes this row a little bit higher so I can see all of my words. You want your row to be high enough that you can see all of your words, but not so high that you have a lot of empty space here. So if I were to maybe go like that, that would look bad because you have all this extra space up at the top. So you'd want to repeat that maneuver until you have your row set to the right height. The other thing that we want to do for formatting our table title is to set the table title to bold. So here you want to make sure that you have your table title selected. You go up to the top and just click the B for bold. And now it's bolded. The next thing that we want to adjust is our description at the bottom of our table. So again, we only want our description to be as wide as our data is. So we'll click on the cell that contains our description, drag it across, until we get to the end of our data. And so now we have 4 cells selected: A5, B5, C5, and D5. We'll then repeat what we did for the table title, with the exception that we aren't going to do any bolding here. So we'll go up here, click the little upside down arrow next to the merge button, click merge across. Then we tell Excel that we also want to wrap text by clicking on the wrap text button. The last thing we need to do here is adjust the row height. So we hover our mouse between the 5 and the 6 until the cursor changes shape, and drag down until all of our words are visible. I dragged down a little bit too far on that last click, so I'm going to go up, and there we go. The next thing that we want to do is adjust our alignment. In our properly formatted table, we want all of our cells to be top aligned, which means that the text in each cell is at the top of the cell instead of in the middle or in the bottom. So we'll start off by selecting all of the cells in our table again, and we'll go over to the alignment section and click on the top align button. So you might have noticed that your stuff moved a little bit in the cells. Depending on the cell height, it might not have moved very much. We also need to adjust the alignment from left to right. So we want to have our table title, our row labels, and our description all be left aligned. So I'm going to select the table title, my row labels, and my description, and I selected those all at one time because I held down the control button on my keyboard as I clicked on them with my mouse. Once those are all selected, you want to go back to the alignment section and click on Align Left. And these all happen to already be left aligned, so you didn't see much movement there, but it's always good to double check to make sure that that is clicked, because it doesn't always do it by default. The alignment of our column labels and our data is a little bit different. So we want these to be center aligned instead of left aligned. So I will select those by clicking and dragging across, and then go up to the alignment section again until I am at the center button. Click on that, and that's going to make all of my data and all my column labels line up in the center of the cell. One thing that you might have noticed as we've been going through is that some of my text is a little bit cut off on the edges, and the reason that is because the letters take up more space than I've allowed in the cell. So I want to adjust the width of my columns, and I can do that the same way that I adjust the height of my rows. I hover my mouse in between the letters, so I'm hovering now in between B and C so that my cursor changed. And once I'm there, I'm going to click on my mouse and kind of drag it to narrow things up. So we want to adjust the width of our rows until we have them so they are wide enough that we can see all the data, but not so wide that we have a lot of empty space. So the age column is now pretty good. The height column needs to be a little bit wider, so I'm going to click between the C and the D and drag things over a little bit, and now I can see all those letters. And then I also want to adjust column D a little bit as well. So now I have all of my columns adjusted correctly. The last thing that we want to do to make our table properly formatted is add some lines to separate our table title from our column labels. We want to separate our column labels from our data, and then our data from our descriptor. So to do that, I'm going to click on the table title first, Then I'm going to go up here, click on the little drop down arrow next to the borders box, and I'm going to select bottom border. So this is going to put a border at the bottom of the cell that I have selected. So you can now see that there's this dark line underneath my table title. The next place that we need a line is separating our column headers, all 4 of them, from the row labels and our data. So I'm going to select those 4 cells and do the same thing. Click on this border button, select bottom border, and you can see that we've added a line in underneath the column labels. The last place that we need a line is between our data and our description. So I'm going to, this time, click on the description, go to the border feature, and this time I'm going to click top border. So this is going to put a border at the top of the box that I've selected. So you can see a dark line has been added in right here. You can see that there are a lot of light gray lines. We don't need to worry about the light gray lines. They won't show up if we copy and paste this table into a Word document. If you want to check to see and make sure that those aren't real lines, that they're just kind of there for positioning purposes, you can go to View. You can click over here on the grid lines. If you put or take the check out of this box, that'll make those lines go away. So we don't want to have any vertical lines in our figure. We just want to have those 3 horizontal lines. So I'm going to put these grid lines back in because they help me kind of see where things are in my table. I just did that to show you that those aren't really real lines. They're just there for kind of orientation purposes. So I'm going to go back to my Home tab, and you guys now have a properly formatted scientific table. So this is something that you could take and paste into a Word document, or submit for a lab report, or submit to theoretically a scientific journal if you were publishing some data from a research project.